Before the Rings of Power, there were the Silmarils. Before Sauron, there was his master Morgoth. Before Aragorn and Arwen, there was Beren and Luthien. Join us as we explore Tolkien and all the ages of Middle-earth with your hosts from theonering.com, Jonathan Watson and Michael Grumbine.
Hey everybody, it's good to be back. We took a 1 week break. We kind of needed it, especially Michael needed it. My goodness, he was down for the count for some time apparently. But you guys didn't know that.
Latest version of the virus that shall not be named.
Yeah, but you survived, as 99.9% of everybody else did too. Sorry, 99.
Turns out the numbers have been revised.
And you know what else it turns out? It turns out that we might not be done with our complete list of film changes as quick as we thought, simply because there are more films coming out that are making changes. So do we have to go through
That's
that?
right.
No, we are preempting the changes actually by going through what Tolkien wrote first now, and then we don't have to worry about what they did later, because you guys will all know exactly what the story's about.
Fear not, brave listeners. We are dedicated to and committed to only taking brief breaks from the actual works of Tolkien to discuss the madness of the mob.
That's right. This week we're talking about the House of Eorl. Eorl,
Eorl,
right? Yeah. Okay. And more particularly of Helm Hammerhand, because of the film that's coming out this December, The War of the Rohirrim, which is the story of Helm Hammerhand, how Helm's Deep became Helm's Deep, and apparently some other modern audience necessities that need to be put in there. Things like the unnamed daughter, for instance, of Helm Hammerhand getting a name and being the primary heroine of the tale, and also finding a long-lost tribe of Shieldmaidens to help take Meduseld back. So there's all this stuff surrounding it. None of it is official, but when you can feel the current pulling you one way, it's probably somewhat true. You're probably going to get there eventually. So we're going to talk about that in our extended podcast, which you guys can get to by going to theonering.com/member or theonering.com/Patreon, actually. Or, if you go to /member, there's also a Patreon link there. It's $4 a month. First month is free. You get to join our Discord chat. You get our extended podcast, which is usually 20 minutes longer or so. And this week we are going to be talking about those changes to the War of the Rohirrim. You've heard my take if you follow us on YouTube.
It was a good take.
Thank you. Yeah, it was the first day that it came out. I'm like, I got to say something because I have thoughts. And so now we get to hear Michael's. Now that he's recovered and his mind isn't addled from a virus of apparently unspecified origin, or origin, if we name it, will be knocked off YouTube still probably.
Right. If I had given my take last week, it would have been a lot more amusing. But I don't think I could have put my name to it. So.
Well, yeah, we could have masked your voice and hid your face, and it would have been really amusing, even more so then. So yeah, go to theonering.com/member.
Silhouette whistleblowers.
Yeah.
Just talking about
Michael will talk like this
about the War of the Rohirrim. Exactly.
So maybe we'll do that in the extended. No, we won't actually do that in the extended podcast. It's too much work right now. But yeah, get that, theonering.com/member, $4 a month. First month is free if you sign up on theonering.com. And it's $5 a month on Patreon. Hey, real fast. So theonering.com, do we want to stick with that forever? That's a question I've been toying around for a long time. And everybody, this is the first time I'm saying anything about this anywhere. So all our listeners, I like, and here's the reason why. One, there's baggage that comes with that that's not my own. I bought theonering.com first. Somebody else bought theonering.com later, a week later, and I regret that decision forever. However, Exploring Tolkien is what we call the podcast. And if you look for Exploring Tolkien, it's super easy to find us because we're number one in everything because nobody else has those keyword combinations. So we're found super easily if we just keep using the words Exploring Tolkien. That's why if you look at my X/Twitter account, it says Exploring Tolkien now, not theonering.com. So anyway, it's just a thought. So if you have thoughts, put your comments here in YouTube if you're watching on YouTube, or you can actually give us a review or send me an email, jonathan@theonering.com, maybe soon to be jonathan@theonering.com, and let me know what you think. If that's indeed the way we should go, it'd be a big change. But maybe worthwhile.
That's an interesting idea. I'm in favor of it, actually.
Oh, okay. That's one vote.
Doesn't matter. My vote doesn't count, but
well, it counts more than all of our listeners. I'll tell you that.
It counts more than any one of our listeners. Maybe that's more true.
Okay. Here, Yes, there. No, okay, I can't go there. All right, so let's talk about War of the Rohirrim, namely as Tolkien wrote it in the House of Errol. The appendix, it's in the appendices, Appendix A, I think it is, in Return
Appendix
of the King.
A. Yep, the Annals
Yep,
of the
just
Kings and Rulers.
yes, yeah. So let me give you a little bit of history of Rohan, and also a really interesting point about this is that this came out, this idea of Rohan that he came up with as he was writing the Lord of the Rings. He didn't come up with this like as part of the history of the Sindar and Quenya and Valinor and everything that came up with that. Right, this came out kind of fully formed almost. And so in the Peoples of Middle Earth, one of the histories of Middle Earth, where Christopher Tolkien found the notes that he could of his father's and puts down kind of the ideas that he has that he had from this here as he was writing them. He noted that essentially it came out. Here's what I'll say about Rohan. There is no other writing extant before the final typescript of the House of Errol from which the text in Appendix A was printed, save for a single typescript page. And then a little bit later in the book, when he's talking about the House of Durin and some other things, he wrote that in the House of Errol, the final typescripts have virtually no antecedents. That means nothing really led up. Like this came out fully formed as he was writing. All these ideas popped in his head, and he had a few little notes here and there, and he modified a name here a little bit later. But really, the whole idea of who the Rohirrim were, where they came from, what their relationship to Gondor was like, came out really fully formed, and he didn't edit it much at all, which is kind of a unique situation for Tolkien. I feel like for something that has such a rich culture, almost it came out fully formed. And I found that curious. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, Michael, but it's different.
It makes it Rohan and the Rohirrim like the Athena of Tolkien, for Tolkien's Athena, right? Because Athena was the Greek goddess that was supposed to have sprung forth fully. From his mind, from his head, his mind,
Zeus's
fully grown.
Mind, right? Yeah,
it's the mind of Zeus. So this is the Athena of Tolkien, because unlike, and it's like you said, it's very unusual because usually he spins and spins and spins on ideas. And people's names change, and the geography changes, and their interaction change, and the key stories are often changes. But this time, it just sorry, wrong one.
Yeah.
Voila.
That's right. It was right there. All right. So let me give you then a history of who the Rohirrim are. All right. So I'm going from some of my notes here because I tried to condense down those 4 pages or 2 pages. It depends on what you're reading it in, of the House of Errol, about the history of them. So here's who they are. So the Rohirrim are descended from the Eotheod, who are men who lived north of Mirkwood between the Misty Mountains and the Forest River there. So some say they were descended from the House of Hador, who, if you listen to our podcast on the Silmarillion, that would be Hurin, Huror, Turin, right? That house. Some may say in Gondor that there's no, this wasn't written by Tolkien as like they are descended from, but it's a nice sort of, like there's history there. And the big history they have between Gondor and these people, or the first initial connection they had, is where they lived was where they destroyed the remaining army of the Witch King of Angmar in the Angmar Wars. And so that gained them the respect of Gondor at the time. And they essentially kind of claimed land up there. And that was in the 1975 of the third Age. So they, for many years then, they lived there. And it wasn't until King Leod, who was, he died trying to tame the horse Fréaláf, who was the first of the Miras of Rohan. And if you remember the Miras of Rohan, that's Shadowfax's progenitor, right? That's the first Miras. He looked at him and he was so enamored of him, he had to try to mount him. And when he did, he was bucked off and hit his head on a rock and died, right? And it was actually Tolkien wrote this here in this section too. He said, men said that Bima, whom the elder call Orome, right, must have brought the sire of the Miras from the west over the sea. So there's that sort of connection even right there with Valinor, that these horses are more than just the normal run-of-the-mill everyday horses that Gondor would have.
Right, that random fox in the Fellowship of the Ring aside, it's very clear that this is, Middle Earth is not Narnia, and so the talking horses, and I know the the Miras do not talk technically, but they are clearly intelligent and have a nobility far beyond. And any beast that talks or has that kind of intelligence has its origins in Valinor. Has some. So the eagles are the same. Even the ents came about because of this request by one of the Valar. So this I always found that to be awesome. And obviously the whole concept of Rohan and the Rohirrim, most people are aware that it has a lot of the culture and the language has a lot of Anglo-Saxon roots for Tolkien. So there's it's kind of like Anglo-Saxons plus horses.
Yeah, which makes for an awesome combination, as we found out. It was King Leod's son Eorl, who was born in 2485. So again, this is about 500 years after they defeated the Witch King's final armies up there east of the Misty Mountains. And also, interestingly, 2485, that's 22 years after Smeagol found the One Ring, or killed his brother to get the One Ring. So Smeagol is older than the entire kingdom of Rohan. I thought that was kind of a whoa.
That is
that puts things in perspective.
I like those kinds of random facts. That's cool.
Yeah. So Eorl goes up to this horse and it's like, no, man, I'm taming you. So he tames the horse and took it into his service to compensate for the death of his father, which is, as we learned earlier, is called weregild, right? It's what's the exact definition of weregild? It's like payment for like blood money, right?
Literally it means blood money. Or blood. Okay. It means blood gold, literally.
Yeah. So in 2509, Gondor faced an attack by the Balkoth, I believe that's how you pronounce it, which essentially means horrible horde. And that's it, right? And so it's just a general term for the people they really didn't like. So they called everybody that, even orcs. So they were facing this attack from them from the west there. And so Cirion, the steward of Gondor, called for help from the Eotheod, and King Eorl rolled out, right? Eorl, the son of the guy who died. Let me get his name right. King Leod, right? Eorl was his son. He tamed Fréaláf, so he's on this horse, I believe, no bridle, no saddle. He just rides him. They arrived at the field of Celebrant just in time to defeat the Easterlings and win the day with Gondor. So where is this field of Celebrant? Well, let me show you, because you can see it. So, remember where Lorien is, right? Lorien is where the Fellowship came after the death of Gandalf and met Galadriel for the first time. So the field of Celebrant is right there in the middle, if you can see that. Mm-hmm. So they rode it down all the way from here, up here in the northern parts of Mirkwood, east of the Misty Mountains, all the way down to the field of Celebrant. So, and it's at this point that Cirion asked Eorl to actually be like, I like you. Could you take over this area here that's a little rough for us? This area right over in here. This is the part where we're having a little trouble. Ben, you can have it all, right? This is going to be your land. And at this point, the year is 2510. And, this relationship between them was sort of set in stone when Eorl swore an oath. And you all remember, like, Gondor calls for aid in the films, and like, what's Theoden going to do? Well, that's because this oath is kind of a binding oath. And here's what Eorl said to Cirion at this point after the battle where they took back the field of Celebrant. Hear now, all peoples who bow not to the shadow in the east. By the gift of the Lord of the Munburg, we will come to dwell in the land that he names Calenardhon. And therefore I vow in my own name and on behalf of the Eotheod of the north, that between us and the great people of the west there shall be friendship forever. Their enemies shall be our enemies, their need shall be our need, and whatsoever evil or threat or assault may come upon them, we will aid them to the utmost end of our strength. This vow shall descend to my heirs, all such as may come after me in our new land, and let them keep it in faith unbroken, lest the shadow fall upon them and they become accursed. So it's not only an oath, it's also like an oath with a curse. Like if you don't hold up your end of your bargain, my heirs, you may become accursed here, right? Lest the
That's
shadow
quite the
fall upon them.
contract, because he's binding he's not just binding himself and his whole kingdom, but all of his descendants to that oath.
Yeah, and it's and at this point, so they swear the oath. The Eothead completely moves from up there in the Misty Mountains and Mirkwood down to Calenarthorn. They call the land the Rittermark, or as we know, just the Mark, which means land of the riders, because they're pretty good with horses now, especially now that they've got Fréaláf. And it was called Rohan by the heir to Cirion, the steward Hallis. And Rohan simply means horse country in Sindrin. And then Rohirrim means host of the host lords. So you have the whole, like, why are they called the Rohirrim? Why are they called Rohan? Why are they called the Rittermark? Because so we have a couple different languages there. Rittermark, right? That's what they call themselves. And then in Gondor they called themselves the Rohirrim, which means host of the host lords. And you hear like Rohirrim, like Haradrim, and now Grim, that means the host of. So the host of Rohan in a way. And that's where we come to kind of there's more to the story, so read more in there. But that's your general look at how did the people come to Rohan. And remember, this is not like the nation of Gondor, which has been established now on the shores or they're on the shores of Mordor, in front of Mordor, and Osgiliath and Minas Tirith, and also and had previously had the kingdom of Arnor, but now destroyed by the Witch King. But they've been there for, at this point, by the time Helm Hammerhand is born in, what is the year, 2691, they'd been there 2,700 years, 2.5 millennia. And Gondor had barely been around for 100 years at that point. So it's a very new nation, and certainly doesn't have the grand feel that Gondor has, because it doesn't come from Numenor. I mean, they called the people of Numenor the men of the West in that oath that Eorl swore to Cirion. Okay, there we go. So now we're going to look at Helm Hammerhand, and we're going to kind of look at it in 3 parts. And we're not going to talk about the film at all. We're just going to talk about what Tolkien wrote. So
this is all Tolkien, folks.
I'm even going to try not to make, I don't know how I can, but I'm going to try to not make any comments about the Rings of Power.
We may not succeed about that.
Okay, so Helm and Freka and Medusel, that's the first part of this here. And let me get my notes here. Sorry, one sec.
And this is the only part where we actually have dialogue written by Tolkien. So there's the only dialogue that he ever writes about the time of Helm Hammerhand comes in this part, which is the dialogue between Helm and Freka.
Yeah, other than the dialogue between Eorl and Fréaláf.
No, I mean of the time of Hammerhand.
Oh, of the time of Hammerhand, right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Because that's our focus is this, because, as you said, they're coming out with the War of the Rohirrim, which is a retelling of the part we're about to talk about. So it's not a retelling of Eorl, and it's not a retelling of the beginnings of Rohan. It's a retelling just of the tale of Helm Hammerhand, as Tolkien says, of the kings of the Mark between Eorl and Theoden, most is said of Helm Hammerhand. So you basically got 3 kings of the Rohirrim that are the greatest. There's the first, Eorl the Young, and then second, Helm Hammerhand, he of whom Helm's Deep is named, and third, Theoden, Thengol's son, who's of course famous for his part in the last war against Sauron, the War of the Ring. So we're about to talk about the middle guy.
The guy who we all know best from Helm's Deep, and perhaps why putting a hammer in his hand was not the best choice for the statue that they gave him. But let's talk about Freka.
Yeah, isn't that funny? Is that funny that they could have done anything? And what's odd is that moments like that, they know the lore, they have the books, so it would have been. I mean, you could have had statues where his hand was the weapon, and that would have been way cooler. That would have been way more impressive, and way more impressive. And I mean, like, even look at that. It even looks like a smithing hammer, not even a war hammer.
Yeah. This is the picture of from the two towers of Helm Hammerhand at Helm's Deep.
Right. So it's sad.
So, well, let's talk about Freka. So what happens here is Helm has a council of the kings or of the chieftains of the land, and since Rohan isn't exactly like it's not a very defined nation state in the sense that Gondor is. There are a lot of smaller villages around. They're a little more scattered than probably Gondor is at this point, and that means there's the edges of this here where you have people who are more Dunlendings or the Wildmen of Dunland who also have a relationship with him, and so you have this guy Freka who says that some say he descended from Fréaláf, who I believe means that he would be a fifth king of Rohan is who Fréaláf was, and but that's not officially that's a rumor again, but he liked to claim that. But he had much Dunlendish blood and was dark-haired, as Tolkien wrote. So here's the thing. Here's what happens, right? Freka has this thing. They have a falling out. I don't know how many details we want to give into this. We learn, one, that Freka wants his son to marry Wolf. Wolf is his name. He wants to marry Helm's unnamed daughter. And Helm says, "You have grown big since you were last here, but it is mostly fat, I guess." And men laughed at that, for Freka was wide in the belt. I love that. He's very direct in his statement, but Tolkien is a little more circumspect in his prose with wide in the belt. So he essentially insults Freka, which is, maybe not the coolest thing to do, but he probably was like, I don't think I'm going to be giving my daughter over to some wild man of the Dunlands in order to sort of establish an actual relationship between this king. He wanted to gain more power, I'm sure, was his goal in asking for his daughter's hand. Would there be any other reason to ask for his daughter's hand in this kind of a political environment there?
Well, so the one reason is that he wanted more power.
Well, he wants to be, he wants to become a part of the he wants to establish his power in Rohan as more than just Freka, but he wants his son to have that relationship with the king of Rohan.
I mean, this is how you become a great dynasty in kingdoms that are ruled by families. You bind your family to a powerful family, and you both gain honor if you're both powerful. And so he's trying. You have Helm, he's the one doing the calling of the council, so he's clearly the king of the Rohirrim. And then you have Freka trying to raise himself. He's already rich, and it's as Tolkien says explicitly. And so he wants to now have power as well as, not power. He wants a nobility. He wants the name to come into his land by marrying Helm's daughter to his son. And his son, him being the son, obviously, he would exercise control over that part of the family. So it's a power play, and he describes it as a staff. In his anger, it says, then Freka fell in a rage and reviled the king and said this at the last: "Old kings that refuse a proffered staff may fall on their knees." So, and Helm answered, "Come, the marriage of your son is a trifle. Let Helm and Freka deal with it later. Meanwhile, the king and his council have matters of moment to consider." So, Helm ignores his revilement, but if you revile the king, that's a grave offense. And so he's just committed a grave offense, and Helm says, let's deal with this later. We have other important things to attend to, and which presumably they do. I'm interested because Freka calls it a staff. So what he seems to be saying here is Helm is old. Helm needs the support, the staff. An old man needs a staff to support himself. Refer to Gandalf's comment in Rohan.
Would you deny an old man his walking staff?
Exactly,
yeah.
Exactly. There's a connection between those. I love Tolkien for this. There's always connections. So the staff that's being offered to the old man, in other words, the weaker party, is being refused. So Freka's saying to Helm, look, I have the strength here. by which he means clearly money and probably people and things like that. And so you're refusing me, and you're going to fall to your knees. In other words, you're going down. So it's a veiled threat, almost of rebellion or of opposition. So Helm pretends, clearly he pretends, because of what he does later, he pretends that this is all, well, we can just ignore this and we'll continue on with our business. And then they go out and talk afterwards. But the way they go out and talk after the council together one-on-one, when the council was over, Helm stood up and laid his great hand on Freka's shoulder, saying, "The king does not permit brawls in his house, but men are freer outside." And he forced Freka to walk before him out from Edoras into the field. So he's basically, first of all, it's showing his strength. Freka's a large man. Yeah. So the fact that he can take his shoulders and just basically force him where he wants to go. And he's removing himself as the king from the situation and saying, now we're going to settle this just as brawlers, as men who have been insulted and men who have done insulting, essentially. And so he goes out, and as you mentioned, he kills Freka, or he actually puts him in a coma in one blow, and then he dies later on.
Yeah. And I think it's at this point that I think he would be like 60 years old or so. He's not a spring chicken either.
Right, which is probably why Freka is making those comments about him being an old man. But he's so strong, and that's one thing I will say about War of the Rohirrim, the one concept art piece they did. I actually like how they're showing Helm Hammerhand. He looks, it's a believable image of a man who's both old and powerful. At least this one shot. We'll see how it looks in the movie, but when the feature
this is the one you're referring to if you're watching.
Yes, that's the one. So you have of the four people in this shot, I like him the most, actually, and it's good that, he is Helm Hammerhand. So he both has massive hands in this, and he looks like an old man that you would not want to mess with. And so,
I was just gonna say you glossed over the name Helm Hammerhand, right? Hammerhand is not, again, let's point out, we saw that picture earlier. It's because he's got a freaking hammer for a hand. He kills the guy in one blow or puts him in a coma. Like
his hand is the hammer.
It's the hammer. His hand. He's not.
His hand doesn't hold hammers. His hand is the hammer, as we'll find out later on in the story.
Yeah. And so, go ahead.
I was just going to say. I was going to say that Freka's men flee after Helm basically puts Freka in a coma, and nothing more is heard or said for 4 years, at least not from Rohan. But what happens 4 years later makes it clear, although Tolkien doesn't say this, but it's absolutely has to be the case, that Freka's people begin plotting revenge, because 4 years later, when there's an invasion by corsairs across Gondor, and it says, 4 years later, 2758, great troubles came to Rohan, and no help could be sent from Gondor, for 3 fleets of the corsairs attacked it, and there was war on all its coasts. At the same time, Rohan was again invaded from the east, and the Dunlendines, seeing their chance, came over the Isen and down from Isengard. It was soon known that Wolf was their leader. They were in great force, for they were joined by enemies of Gondor that had landed in the mouths of Lefnui and Isen. So Lefnui is a river that flows southwest from the White Mountains in Gondor down to the coast. It's a part of Gondor we never see in any of the trilogy. So and then the Isen, of course, is the river that flows from the mouth near Isengard. And so there's in order for, the very bottom, the word Ered, sorry. There we go. You got it. So you got the Lefnui, you got the Isen up there, and then you got the Lefnui bottom left of the screen. And it ends in the mountains. So you got this Corsair force coming up to the word Ered, and clearly then marching up to the Gap of Rohan from there. And the Adorn River is the lands; those are the lands which Freka and his people have their holdings. And Wolf, now led by the son Wolf, and so I think clearly, the Wolf's people have been lay plans and make common cause with the invaders from the rivers, and to attack the Westfold through the Gap of Rohan, while it is also being attacked from the east, which in my mind, that's why some of the concept art had Mumakil on it, because Rohan's being attacked from both directions at once. And there's no help from Gondor. And which is hilariously, in the books, correct me if I'm wrong, Theoden never says anything about where was Gondor when the Westfold fell.
No, that is never said in the books.
Right.
Never said.
It's one of those lines that is actually quite powerful because it expresses it's one of those funnier moments about the changes when we get to that change in sometime in 2030 or something. And I'll give a preview of my thoughts on it now. Theoden never says that in the book. The Westfold has indeed fallen, and his son has died in the fall as the Westfold fell. But he never says anything like that. It's meant to show the tension where Gondor is calling for aid from Rohan, but Gondor wasn't there when Rohan needed help. So it's trying to show that tension, and so Jackson invents a line that Theoden never speaks. Nevertheless, in both Jackson's version and in Tolkien's version, Theoden does what we would regard in Western civilization as the truly noble thing, which is he answers the call regardless of his own people's distress. So the honor of the vow that they made, that Eorl made on his behalf many generations before, holds him still. And I don't mean holds him like he's forced to. I mean holds him like he chooses to hold to the vow. And answers honorably in both cases. So it's one of those funny things where Jackson invented a line that actually makes Theoden in that few seconds a little less noble, because he's considering saying no, because it's the petty, like, you said you didn't help me, so why should I scratch you didn't scratch my back, why should I scratch yours? So he's a little pettier in Jackson's version because of the line being said, but I do think it's it validly shows that tension and builds to that moment of nobility. So it's a change I don't mind, even though it's not Tolkien's work, because he's in a cinematic version and he has to try to get across these centuries of vows in a second.
Yeah, it was a change that I hated at first, but the more I saw it, I'm like, no, it's okay. I still hate that it was a change. I mean, I'm such a purist that I hate it's just a change. So
yeah, I'm with you on. There's a part of me that is always with you on that, but in this case, I can see he's trying to give us the real worth of Theoden's decision and to join Gondor. So Anyway, so back to Helm.
Back to Helm Hammerhand. All right. So Helm tries to defend at the River Isen, the fords of Isen, I would imagine. I don't think he says that, but he just says, the crossings of Isen. So yeah.
He does.
But he was driven back and they went to the Hornburg. This is what it was called at the time. The Hornburg. Why? Well, there's a great horn there and it's a burg. It's a fortress. And he was besieged there, right? Wolf at this point, Wolf, the son of Freka, who he slammed with his hammer hand, took Idras, sat in Meduseld, and it was there that Haleth, Helm's son, died defending Meduseld. Tolkien wrote, there Haleth, Helm's son, fell last of all, defending the doors. I find it interesting his name is Haleth, and there's only one other Haleth that I know of, and that's Haleth, the people of Haleth. Haleth, who kept her people together after her father and brother died as they were crossing was it the Mountains of Shadow then? They were near there. They were on the borders of
was it the Mountains of Shadow or the Blue Mountains?
I don't know. It's been too long since I've done the Silmarillion, Michael. I can't remember anything. Right? A woman who held her people together, but her name was Haleth, and his name is Haleth. Tolkien did like to reuse names too. In his stories, particularly in Lord of the Rings, because Silmarillion hadn't been published yet. Okay, so it's at this point that they're stuck in the Hornburg for 5 months, the longest winter, the long winter, capital L, capital W in the appendix. So we know it's important. And this is my favorite, by far my favorite part of this here, because Helm doesn't just sit there and lick his wounds. But maybe for a time he does, because he loses his son in the snow, right? His other son goes out and through all the famine, they didn't have any food or didn't have enough food. Here's what he wrote. Helm grew fierce and gaunt for famine and grief, and the dread of him alone was worth many men in the defense of the burg. But it's his son who is, quote, lost in the snow. Let me find that line. Yeah. Hama, his younger son, led men out on a sortie and foray, but they were lost in the snow. So he's lost both of his sons. It's at this point he kind of has nothing else to like. He sees like his doom bearing down on him, right? His sons are gone. All he has left is his unnamed daughter. And so it's at this point that he becomes a legend. Maybe I'll just read this whole paragraph because it's so good. Helm grew fierce and gaunt for famine and grief, and the dread of him alone was worth many men in the defense of the burg. He would go out by himself, clad in white, and stalk like a snow troll into the camps of his enemies, and slay many men with his hands. It was believed that if he bore no weapon would bite on him. The Dunlendings said that if he could find no food, he ate men. The tale lasted long in Dunland. Helm had a great horn, and soon it was marked that before he sallied forth, he would blow a blast upon it that echoed in the deep. And then so great a fear fell on his enemies that instead of gathering to take him or kill him, they fled away down the Coombe. So just one man, right? He was so, his anger, his bitterness, he was so intense. Like he was clad in white. He was I don't know, what is the closest thing, right? He was a wraith he was a wraith coming in to destroy them because he was a white wraith, I guess you could say, instead of the black wraith for the Dunlendings there, for the men.
Right, he was truly a wraith in one sense. Like he seemed unkillable, and he was just the spirit of vengeance that would haunt the land and basically unstoppable and inhuman. You know, he's feasting on flesh now.
Yes.
So he's gotten to the point where and who knows how much of this is legend and how much is real, except that it's pretty clear that he probably didn't have a weapon, or at least didn't often use a weapon. He often still used his hands and as weapons. And so anyway, it's become a legend. And you have the 5 months of winter. I was thinking about this because there are plenty of places in the world which have 5 months of winter-ish weather, but obviously that's not natural for Rohan, and it looks like that meant 5 months of snow, which isn't, even though you could call some parts of winter, you know, there's actually thick snow over. In fact, it was so bad that when it finally melted, it actually changed the geography. Like it created these rivers that came down in marshland outside of Helm's Deep, or near Helm's Deep in the Westfold. And so, it's pretty impressive weather, and basically like a mini ice age over a year, or maybe the year 1815, right? It's that 1 year where there was the year of no summer.
Oh, yeah, that was the Mount Pinatubo erupted or something like that.
Yep.
That year.
Yeah, it was it had erupted the previous year, and the weather patterns made it so that there basically was no summer, and there was like a super long winter, and that's when Mary Shelley's Frankenstein got written, among other things. So,
the whole story of Helm Hammerhand as a wraith, as a vengeful white demon in a way, taking out the Dunlendings, is capped in the way that he died. And here's what Tolkien wrote. One night men heard the horn blowing, but Helm did not return. In the morning there came a sun gleam, the first for long days, and they saw a white figure standing still on the dike, alone, for none of the Dunlendings dared come near. There stood Helm, dead as a stone, but his knees were unbent. Yet men said that the horn was still heard at times in the deep, and the wraith of Helm, wraith, I didn't even realize that was the word that they used, and the wraith of Helm would walk among the foes of Rohan and kill men with fear. So not only in life was he eventually, in death, he won't even bend the knee. He won't even fall down. He's still standing there in death, exacting vengeance, because you can still hear that there. What a great visual.
Yep. And that by itself, I mean, there's so much of that story, which is so awesome from a storytelling perspective. And my hope would be that anyone adapting this into a visual story would lean into that. But, or, you could lean into Amazon's.
Stop. We're not talking about it. We're going to move on. All right. So that's chapter 2 act 2 of this story. Go there. I wasn't even the one who did it. It was all you. Are you still sick? What's going on?
I love Tolkien's work so much that when we come across, we read, even this is an inline story. He's just writing. He wrote the beginning of the foundation of the Rohirrim with Eorl Young, and we know the end, or at least the end from a storytelling perspective, which is Theoden.
Yeah,
and this is clearly Tolkien writing the Annals of the Kings and Rulers, and is like, well, I got to have a middle guy somewhere, something to tie them together. I mean it seriously, and clearly. Right. Because he had come up with the name Helm's Deep already, and so he's like, I'm going to write about Helm, clearly, and then so he's writing about it, and then he pens out this story, which is so awesome and
extant. He just did it.
Yep,
no
all at
precursors.
Once, and then he ties in so many things like the Symbolmen, and everything else. It's just so awesome, and then I remind myself of what they're going to focus on in the show, and it makes me cringe. But anyway, back to Tolkien. So this story is not over. The Rohirrim are not defeated because of this, because we have Fréaláf, son of Hild, Helm's sister. So this is Helm's nephew. Then comes out of Dunham,
and I think kind of in the same way. Let's remember that it's not Theoden's son that takes the throne either. It's his nephew.
Yep.
So there's almost I'm sure that similarity was forefront in his mind when he wrote this.
Absolutely. This is. I mean, Tolkien writes echoes. Everything's an echo of what came before, and what comes after is usually a lesser echo of what came before. And so Fréaláf comes down from Dunharrow. So he comes down from that land in the heights that has the paths of the dead at the end of it. Comes down, past the paths of the Woses, the switchbacks down the cliffs, and they come and surprise the Dunlendings, which in a way reminds me of Gandalf's coming and surprising the armies of Isengard from behind. But they come down of Dunharrow, to which many have fled, and with a small company of desperate men, he surprised Wolf in Meduseld and slew him and regained Edoras. So he goes right for the heart of the land. Yeah. There were great floods after the snows, and the Vale of Entwash became a vast fen. The eastern invaders perished or withdrew, and there came help at last from Gondor, by roads both east and west of the mountains. Before the year 2759 was ended, the Dunlendings were driven out, even from Isengard, and then Fréaláf became king, just like Éomer becomes king.
Mm-hmm.
As you pointed out.
Yeah. So the battle is let's remember, it's Fréaláf. Fréaláf is the one. Fréaláf is the one that wins the day here. Nephew
of Helm Hammerhand.
So we'll talk about what they're doing in the film, The War of the Rohirrim, in our extended podcast. But here at this point, this is when they bring Helm back from the Hornburg and laid him in the 9th mound, which means he was the 9th king of Rohan. Mm-hmm. Even after the white, okay, help me pronounce this. Symbolmine. I can't remember.
I always said Symbolmine. It might be Symbolmine, but I'll have to look it up. I think it's a Sindarin word, which means it would be Symbolmine. So
that would make sense.
But I have to look up the origin
with the essential umlaut over the e. That would make sense. Okay, sorry guys. Something I should have looked at. It's like when you read it over and over again, you say it in your head, and you don't really have to say it out loud. And when you finally get to it, you're like, oh wait, simple. Okay. And then there's more after the story, after the retaking of Meduseld, and how Saruman comes back to Orthanc, and Fréaláf is involved in that too. So go ahead and read that. But this is the story of Helm Hammerhand, a man who probably I would guess that he has some issues, right? He has some anger issues, maybe, and maybe that's what they're going to lead into into the movies, which we can talk about. But he's a hero. He's not a villain. He's actually there to protect his people, because this guy Freka, who is right of the wild men, most of his ancestors are the wild men of Dunland. They're Dunlendings. He's not of Rohan, but he clearly wants the power. But Helm Hammerhand doesn't let him. And even after they're driven to Helm's Deep, which was renamed from the Hornburg, a second name from the Hornburg, they go through a 5-month winter. The famine that comes after that and through that, the loss of both Helm and his two sons. They still have the courage, the audacity to make sort of a Death Star run with Fréaláf with some desperate men in order to take out the head through the exhaust port of Meduseld. So
I was wondering, okay, how far is it going to go? Is it going to go all the way to exhaust
all the way,
port?
man.
The answer
That's
is,
right,
of course, he is.
So anyway, so that's the story of Helm Hammerhand, and it's a great story. There's no reason to change it, everybody. Just saying. Let's not change
And
it.
by change it, we don't mean add details and words that did not appear in Appendix A. We mean take what you found in Appendix A that we just recapped, because that's Tolkien's story, and then expand it. So, to be clear, I have no problem with the daughter of Helm Hammerhand having a name and being a character. No problem at all. She could easily be a character in fact, she should be if you're going to expand this story. But stick to the story. You can't do better than Tolkien did. You can tell yourself that, but you're probably doing drugs when you do. So you're just wrong. You can't do better than Tolkien. You can take Tolkien's story and flesh it out and stick to his themes and tell us an awesome story and fill in details that Tolkien didn't write, as long as they stick to his story. But once you start saying, well, we'll just change this. Well, we'll just add this. We'll add a bunch of this. That is contrary to Tolkien's story. Then you're gonna fall on your face, because you're not going to do it as good as Tolkien. And I don't care if your name is Peter Jackson. It ain't going to happen.
It's not. No, never. Particularly if you come at it with this is the story that we need to tell, not the story that Tolkien told. And I think most screenwriters come in with that. I have the story that I'm going to tell by telling this other guy's story because I can do it better. And as George R. R. Martin pointed out in one of his recent blog posts, because he's written way more of blog posts in the last 15 years than he has of his actual story. But he did say like 999 out of 1,000 attempts at this fail dramatically. That everybody who says, I'm going to take this story and make it better, it never works or almost never works. And if it does work, it probably means that the original story was nowhere near the quality of something like Tolkien was.
Yep, exactly right.
And that's why I would say even something like Game of Thrones did so well as a TV series, because the original Game of Thrones, right, the books are nowhere near the quality of what Tolkien had, in my humble opinion.
Oh yeah, no, they aren't.
Yeah, it's not that humble.
They're quite popular, and there's a lot of. I mean, George R. R. Martin has a lot of writing talent. Fantastic talent. Although those blogs you're talking about, I call them his blog obituary, because clearly they're going to be the last thing we get from him.
That's an unfortunate turn of phrase, blog obituary. Wait, what? Or okay, I see.
Yes,
where you're going.
it has other connotations.
Obituary, blog obituary. Okay, we got it. Okay, good.
I'm talking about the fact. I mean, I could be talking about other things too. But.
No, that's true. All right. So in our extended podcast, guys, all of this, it comes to a head because we get the primary character in War of the Rohirrim is Hera, the daughter of Helm, the primary heroine. Like, she's the hero of the story,
and she's also queen of the gods, right?
I know, right? Oh, why that name? That has
queen,
okay. Well,
do you know who gave us the idea of an all-female warrior tribe? Well, it was the Greeks. And do you know which goddess the Greeks that tribe worshipped?
Hera. That's interesting. Yeah. That's a good point. Wow, I didn't even wow. Anyway, guys, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about
but it's not that. No. It's Hera. It's Hera, because the word Hera also appears occasionally
in Germanic,
in Germanic languages too. So no, it's definitely not they're definitely not.
No, it has nothing to do with it. No, not at all. Not at all. That would also have nothing to do with the fact that they're going to find a long lost tribe of Shieldmaidens to help them retake Meduseld. Apparently, there's nothing.
Amazon.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to talk about that in our extended podcast. You can get that by going to thewondering.com/member. Become a member. $4 a month. First month is completely free. No harm, no foul. If you think that it's not worth your latte a month, everybody always uses that as the $4 amount. What else is a good thing? Good thing for $4. As your 1/4 of a freaking Chipotle burrito.
Yeah,
as a
you get the tortilla as your default, your order of three tortillas.
that's right. As your 2 donuts from Dunkin' Donuts that are way too dry and kind of bland. Anyway, $4 a month. First month is free.
All right, we'll come up with a better analogy.
Yeah. Or if you want to become a sponsor, like Harrison, Adam, and Lynn, you can do that. And they give above and beyond to keep us going. And we really appreciate that. We appreciate all y'all. Also, hey, give us a like, give us a subscribe. Become a freeloader in our Discord chat. You can do that just by clicking the link at the top of the show notes here, and join us there. You don't get the full Discord chat as you do as you become a member, but you do get some nice interactions with folks. I haven't been in there lately just because, man, it was a busy week, and we're recording these series usually. I'm usually go live 4 hours from now. I'm not gonna be able to do that by the time we put out this one. But hey, we'll get there. Yeah, we'll blame it on the China virus. So
I didn't say it.
I mean, we'll blame it on the virus that is yet to be named in the country of origin. So, yeah, we'll see y'all on the other side of this wonderful podcast about
go forth, freeloaders, and go forth and live your freeloader life until next week.